Question 1. Analysis of a driver operating a vehicle in Manawatu, Wanganui, with a young child as a passenger, encounters significant traffic congestion. The driver is running late for an appointment and feels pressured to make up time. Considering the driver's obligations under New Zealand road user rules, which of the following actions best reflects responsible and lawful driving behavior in this situation? Option A. Exceed the posted speed limit to try and make up for lost time due to the congestion. Option B. Tailgate the vehicle ahead, honk the horn frequently, and make aggressive lane changes to try and move through traffic faster. Option C. Maintain a safe following distance, adhere to the posted speed limits, and signal intentions clearly when changing lanes or turning, accepting the delay. Option D. Use a mobile phone to search for alternative routes or check appointment times while the vehicle is in motion. Correct answer is C. Maintain a safe following distance, adhere to the posted speed limits, and signal intentions clearly when changing lanes or turning, accepting the delay. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in Manawatu, Wanganui, because it requires them to balance their personal desire to reach their destination quickly with the paramount legal and ethical obligation to operate a vehicle safely and in accordance with road rules. The presence of a child passenger introduces an additional layer of responsibility, as the driver must prioritize the child's safety above all else. Misjudging the situation or succumbing to impatience can lead to dangerous driving behaviors, potentially resulting in accidents, fines, or license suspension, all of which have significant consequences for the driver and their family. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the driver acknowledging the traffic congestion and the need to be patient. They should maintain a safe following distance, observe speed limits, and signal their intentions clearly when changing lanes or turning. This approach aligns with the fundamental principles of safe driving and the specific requirements of the Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004 in New Zealand, which mandates drivers to drive with due care and attention and to obey all traffic signals and signs. Prioritizing safety over speed is a core ethical responsibility for all road users, especially when a child is present. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to aggressively tailgate the vehicle ahead, honk the horn repeatedly, or make unsafe lane changes in an attempt to move faster. This behavior directly violates the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004, specifically sections related to maintaining a safe following distance and driving with due care and attention. It creates a hazardous situation for all road users and demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other drivers and passengers, including the child in the car. Another incorrect approach is to exceed the posted speed limit, believing that faster travel will compensate for the delay. This is a direct contravention of the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004, which sets speed limits for different road conditions and zones. Speeding significantly reduces a driver's reaction time and increases the severity of any potential collision, posing an extreme risk to the child passenger and others. A third incorrect approach is to become distracted by trying to find alternative routes on a mobile phone while the vehicle is in motion. This violates the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004 regarding the use of mobile phones while driving and the general requirement to maintain full attention to the driving task. Distracted driving is a major cause of accidents and demonstrates a failure to prioritize the safety of the child and other road users. Professional reasoning. When faced with traffic congestion, a professional driver in Manawatu, Wanganui should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes safety and adherence to the law. This involves 1. Assessing the immediate environment, observing traffic flow, road conditions, and speed limits. 2. Identifying potential hazards, recognizing that impatience or aggressive driving can create new risks. 3. Recalling legal obligations, remembering the requirements of the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004 regarding safe driving practices, speed limits, and mobile phone use. 4. Considering the passenger's safety, acknowledging the heightened responsibility when carrying a child. 5. Choosing the safest and most legal course of action, which is to drive patiently and defensively, even if it means arriving later than desired. Question 2. The review process indicates that a driver applying for a learner's license in Manawatu, Wanganui has disclosed a medical condition that may affect their driving ability. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing officer to ensure compliance with the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2009, and uphold public safety. Option A. Request a detailed report from the applicant's medical practitioner regarding their fitness to drive and consider any necessary license conditions. Option B. Issue the learner's license immediately, assuming the applicant is aware of their capabilities. Option C. Postpone the decision indefinitely until the applicant provides further, unspecified information. Option D. Refuse the learner's license outright based on the disclosure of a medical condition. The correct answer is A. Request a detailed report from the applicant's medical practitioner regarding their fitness to drive and consider any necessary license conditions. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest scenario involving a driver applying for a learner's license. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the licensing officer to balance the applicant's right to obtain a license with the paramount importance of public safety and adherence to the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2009 in New Zealand. The officer must make a judgment call that upholds the integrity of the licensing system while being fair to the applicant. The best approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the applicant's medical condition and its potential impact on their ability to drive safely, as mandated by the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2009. This includes consulting with the applicant's medical practitioner to obtain a comprehensive understanding of their fitness to drive, considering any necessary restrictions or conditions that might be imposed on their license. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety by ensuring that only medically fit individuals are licensed, while also respecting the applicant's rights by conducting a fair and evidence-based evaluation. It directly aligns with the principles of the Land Transport Rule, which requires the registrar of motor vehicles to be satisfied that an applicant is medically fit to drive. An incorrect approach would be to grant the license without further investigation, assuming the applicant's self-assessment is sufficient. This fails to meet the legal requirement of the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2009, which places the onus on the registrar to be satisfied of medical fitness. Ethically, it compromises public safety by potentially licensing an individual who poses a risk. Another incorrect approach would be to summarily refuse the license based solely on the applicant's disclosure of a medical condition, without seeking professional medical advice or considering potential mitigating factors or adaptations. This is discriminatory and fails to adhere to the principle of fair assessment enshrined in the spirit of the legislation. The Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2009, does not mandate automatic refusal for all medical conditions, but requires an assessment of fitness. A further incorrect approach would be to delay the decision indefinitely without clear communication or a defined process for obtaining necessary information. This is unprofessional and does not serve the applicant or the public interest. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and adherence to the efficient processing expected under administrative law principles. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential risks and regulatory requirements. This is followed by gathering all relevant information objectively, consulting with subject matter experts, in this case, medical practitioners, evaluating the information against legal and ethical standards, and finally, making a reasoned and documented decision. Transparency and clear communication with the applicant throughout the process are also crucial. Question 3. Performance analysis shows a driver's license applicant in Manawatu, Wanganui is eager to obtain their license and claims to have completed all necessary pre-licensing requirements, but has not provided proof of passing the relevant tests. As a licensing agent, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with New Zealand's Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017? Option A. Immediately refuse the license application and instruct the applicant to return only when they have physical proof of passing all tests, without offering any assistance in verification. Option B. Verify the applicant's claim by checking official records for proof of successful completion of all required tests, and ensuring all other documentation meets the standards set by the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017, before proceeding with the license application. Option C. Issue the driver's license based on the applicant's verbal assurance that they have met all requirements, assuming they are being truthful. Option D. Expedite the license issuance by accepting the applicant's incomplete documentation and promising to follow up on the missing test results later. The correct answer is B. Verify the applicant's claim by checking official records for proof of successful completion of all required tests and ensuring all other documentation meets the standards set by the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2017 before proceeding with the license application. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2017 in New Zealand. The applicant's eagerness to obtain their license, coupled with their potential misunderstanding of the rules, creates a situation where a licensing agent must uphold the integrity of the licensing process without being unduly influenced by external pressures. The agent's responsibility is to ensure all legal prerequisites are met before issuing a license, thereby protecting public safety on Manawatu Wanganui roads. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves strictly adhering to the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2017. This means verifying that the applicant has successfully completed all required stages of the licensing process, including passing the appropriate tests for the class of license they are applying for, and providing all necessary documentation. The agent must confirm the applicant meets the eligibility criteria as outlined in the rule, such as age, identity, and medical fitness. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the legal framework designed to ensure only competent and qualified individuals operate vehicles, thereby fulfilling the agent's statutory duty and ethical obligation to public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves issuing the license based on the applicant's assurance that they have completed the necessary steps without independent verification. This fails to comply with the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2017, which mandates verification of test results and documentation. Ethically, this compromises public safety by potentially licensing an unqualified driver. Another incorrect approach is to expedite the process by overlooking minor discrepancies in documentation, assuming they are inconsequential. This contravenes the rule's requirements for complete and accurate documentation, which are in place to prevent fraud and ensure proper identification. It also undermines the fairness of the licensing system. A further incorrect approach is to defer the decision to a supervisor without having first attempted to verify the information or understand the specific requirements of the rule. While seeking guidance is sometimes appropriate, a licensing agent has a primary responsibility to understand and apply the regulations. This approach demonstrates a lack of diligence and an abdication of immediate responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals in licensing role should employ a systematic decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the relevant legal framework, in this case the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017. 2. Understanding the specific requirements for the transaction at hand, issuing a driver's license. 3. Gathering all necessary information and documentation from the applicant. 4. Verifying the accuracy and completeness of this information against the legal requirements. 5. Making a decision based solely on compliance with the law and established procedures. If there is any ambiguity or a need for clarification, the professional should consult the relevant regulations or seek guidance from appropriate internal resources, but the initial responsibility for applying the rules lies with them. Question 4. Compliance review shows a driver in Manawatu Wanganui needs to transport their sick child urgently, but has an expired driver license. What is the most appropriate advice to provide, adhering strictly to New Zealand's Road User Rules 2008? Option A. Inform the individual that they can drive if they promise to renew their license immediately after the emergency. Option B. Advise the individual that they cannot legally drive the vehicle without a valid license and suggest alternative transport options. Option C. Suggest that the individual drive cautiously and try to avoid being stopped by the police. Option D. Recommend that the individual drive and state they were unaware of the license expiry if questioned. The correct answer is B. Advise the individual that they cannot legally drive the vehicle without a valid license and suggest alternative transport options. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the immediate need for a driver to operate a vehicle with the legal requirement to possess a valid license. The driver's stated reason for needing to drive, transporting a sick child, introduces an emotional element that can cloud judgment. However, the Road User Rules 2008, New Zealand, are clear on the necessity of a valid license for driving. The challenge lies in upholding the law while acknowledging the urgency of the situation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves advising the individual that they cannot legally drive without a valid license, regardless of the circumstances. This aligns directly with the Road User Rules 2008, specifically the provisions requiring a driver to hold a current and appropriate driver license for the class of vehicle being operated. While empathetic to the driver's situation, the primary duty is to ensure compliance with traffic laws to maintain road safety for all users. Offering alternative solutions that do not involve illegal driving is the responsible course of action. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising the individual that they can drive if they promise to get a license immediately is incorrect because it directly contravenes the Road User Rules 2008. The law does not permit driving without a license, even with a promise of future compliance. This approach undermines the regulatory framework and creates a precedent for illegal behavior. Suggesting that the individual drive but avoid being stopped by police is also incorrect and highly irresponsible. This not only violates the Road User Rules 2008, but also actively encourages evasion of law enforcement, which is a serious offense. It prioritizes expediency over legality and safety. Recommending that the individual drive and claim they were unaware of the license requirement is incorrect. Ignorance of the law is generally not a valid defense, and the Road User Rules 2008 are publicly accessible. This approach attempts to circumvent the law through a false premise and is ethically unsound. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the relevant legislation, in this case, the Road User Rules 2008. 2. Assessing the immediate situation and the individual's stated needs. 3. Identifying legally permissible actions and solutions. 4. Communicating the legal requirements clearly and empathetically. 5. Offering practical, lawful alternatives to address the individual's needs, such as suggesting public transport, a taxi, or contacting a friend or family member for assistance. Question 5. Investigation of a driver licensing application in the Manawatu Wanganui region has revealed that the applicant has been driving unregistered vehicles on private land for several years and claims extensive familiarity with the local road network. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with the land transport driver licensing Rule 2017? Option A. Expedite the licensing process by waiving the practical driving assessment due to the applicant's stated experience. Option B. Accept a letter of recommendation from a local driving instructor who knows the applicant as sufficient evidence of competency. Option C. Issue a provisional license based on the applicant's claimed familiarity with local roads and their experience driving on private land. Option D. Conduct a full theoretical knowledge test and a comprehensive practical driving assessment, as per the official Manawatu Wanganui driver licensing syllabus. Correct answer is D. Conduct a full theoretical knowledge test and a comprehensive practical driving assessment, as per the official Manawatu Wanganui driver licensing syllabus. Explanation. Investigation of a driver's licensing process in the Manawatu Wanganui region presents unique challenges due to the need to balance public safety with efficient service delivery. A key challenge is ensuring that all applicants, regardless of their background or perceived experience, meet the stringent safety standards mandated by the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. This requires a thorough and objective assessment process that is not influenced by external pressures or assumptions. The best approach involves a systematic and evidence-based evaluation of the applicant's driving skills and knowledge against the specific requirements of the Manawatu Wanganui driver licensing standards. This means conducting a comprehensive practical driving assessment that directly tests the competencies outlined in the official driver licensing syllabus, and a theoretical knowledge test that accurately reflects the rules of the road and safe driving practices relevant to New Zealand. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017, which mandates objective assessment to ensure road safety. It prioritizes the public interest by ensuring only competent drivers are licensed, thereby minimizing the risk of accidents and promoting a safer road environment for all users in the Manawatu Wanganui region. An approach that bypasses a formal assessment based on a perceived familiarity with local roads is professionally unacceptable. This fails to comply with the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, as it does not provide objective evidence of the applicant's competency. It introduces bias and a significant risk of licensing unsafe drivers, undermining the purpose of the licensing system and potentially leading to accidents. Another unacceptable approach is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or recommendations from friends or family. This method lacks any regulatory basis and does not satisfy the requirements of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017 for a formal assessment. It is subjective and does not guarantee the applicant possesses the necessary skills and knowledge to operate a vehicle safely. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of licensing over thoroughness is also professionally unsound. While efficiency is desirable, it must not come at the expense of safety. The Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017 emphasizes a rigorous assessment process. Expediting licensing without proper evaluation directly contravenes this rule and compromises road safety in the Manawatu-Wanganui region. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory requirements, Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. They must then assess the applicant's situation against these requirements, prioritizing objective evidence of competency. Any deviation from the prescribed assessment procedures must be justified by the regulations themselves, not by convenience or external factors. The ultimate goal is to uphold public safety and the integrity of the licensing system. Question 6. Comparative studies suggest that when preparing a learner for their driver's license in the Manawatu-Wanganui region of New Zealand, what is the most ethically sound and regulatorily compliant approach for a driving instructor to adopt? Option A. Prioritize the learner's immediate comfort and confidence, potentially glossing over minor driving errors to avoid discouraging them. Option B. Instruct the learner to strictly follow instructions without explaining the underlying reasons for specific driving techniques or rules. Option C. Focus exclusively on teaching the specific maneuvers and knowledge required to pass the driving test, with minimal emphasis on broader safety principles. Option D. Emphasize comprehensive skill development, including hazard perception and defensive driving, ensuring a deep understanding of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, and its application to real-world driving scenarios. The correct answer is D. Emphasize comprehensive skill development, including hazard perception and defensive driving, ensuring a deep understanding of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, and its application to real-world driving scenarios. Explanation. Comparative studies suggest that effective driver education programs in Manawatu-Wanganui, New Zealand, must consider the diverse needs and perspectives of all stakeholders involved in the licensing process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate goal of passing the driving test with the broader, long-term objective of fostering safe and responsible road users. The licensing authority, driving instructors, and the learner driver all have distinct interests and responsibilities. The best approach involves a driving instructor who prioritizes comprehensive skill development and adherence to the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. This instructor would focus on teaching not just the mechanics of driving, but also hazard perception, defensive driving techniques, and a thorough understanding of New Zealand road rules, including those specific to the Manawatu-Wanganui region, e.g., understanding local traffic patterns, specific signage, or common road conditions. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the purpose of the driver licensing system, to ensure that only competent and safe drivers are granted a license, thereby protecting public safety on the roads. It upholds the ethical responsibility of the instructor to prepare the learner for real-world driving, not just for the test. An approach that solely focuses on passing the test, by teaching only the minimum requirements or tricks to pass the assessment, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to equip the learner with the necessary skills for safe driving beyond the test environment, potentially leading to dangerous situations and contravening the spirit and intent of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which aims to reduce road accidents. Another unacceptable approach is one where the instructor prioritizes the learner's comfort and confidence above all else, potentially overlooking or downplaying minor errors or areas of weakness that could impact safety. While building confidence is important, it should not come at the expense of rigorous training and adherence to safety standards mandated by the rule. This approach risks creating a driver who is overconfident but underprepared for challenging situations. Finally, an instructor who neglects to explain the rationale behind certain rules or techniques, simply demanding compliance without understanding, is also professionally deficient. This hinders the learner's ability to adapt and make informed decisions in novel situations, which is a critical component of safe driving, and a failure to fully educate the learner as required by the principles of good driver training. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the overarching goal of the licensing system, public safety. This involves a commitment to the regulatory framework, land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017, a thorough assessment of the learner's needs and progress, and a pedagogical approach that emphasizes understanding and application of safe driving principles, not just rote memorization or test-taking strategies. Question 7. The investigation demonstrates that a traffic officer in the Manawatu-Wanganui region has observed Mr. Henderson driving erratically on a rural road. Considering the officer's duty to ensure road safety and the provisions of New Zealand's Land Transport Act 1998 and Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for the officer? Option A. Engage in a high-speed pursuit of Mr. Henderson's vehicle to apprehend him for the erratic driving. Option B. Immediately issue an infringement notice for erratic driving without stopping the vehicle to understand the context. Option C. Ignore the erratic driving, assuming the driver will correct themselves and that it does not warrant intervention. Option D. Observe the erratic driving and if it persists and poses a clear danger, initiate a traffic stop to assess the driver's condition and the reason for the behavior. The correct answer is D. Observe the erratic driving and, if it persists and poses a clear danger, initiate a traffic stop to assess the driver's condition and the reason for the behavior. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, has been observed by a traffic officer exhibiting erratic driving behavior on a rural road in the Manawatu-Wanganui region of New Zealand. The officer is faced with the immediate decision of how to address this potentially dangerous situation, balancing public safety with procedural fairness. This scenario is professionally challenging because the officer must quickly assess the risk, consider the appropriate level of intervention, and act in accordance with the Land Transport Act 1998 and Associated Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004, which govern traffic enforcement in New Zealand. The officer's judgment is critical to ensuring public safety without unduly penalizing the driver if the behavior is due to a temporary, non-infringing cause. The best approach involves the traffic officer observing the erratic driving, and if it persists and poses a clear danger, initiating a traffic stop to assess the driver's condition and the reason for the behavior. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety by intervening in a potentially hazardous situation. The Land Transport Act 1998 empowers traffic officers to stop vehicles if they have reasonable grounds to suspect an offense has been committed or if the vehicle is being driven in a dangerous manner. The Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004 further outlines responsibilities for drivers to drive safely and without endangering others. By stopping the vehicle, the officer can ascertain if Mr. Henderson is impaired, unwell, or experiencing a mechanical issue, allowing for appropriate action, which could range from a warning to issuing an infringement notice or even requiring the driver to stop driving if deemed unfit. This aligns with the ethical duty of care that traffic officers have to the public. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the erratic driving, assuming it is a minor issue or that the driver will correct themselves. This fails to uphold the officer's duty to ensure road safety and could lead to a serious accident, violating the spirit and letter of the Land Transport Act 1998. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately issue an infringement notice for erratic driving without first stopping the vehicle to understand the context. This could be unjust if the behavior was due to a temporary, unavoidable circumstance, such as swerving to avoid an animal, and does not allow for a proper assessment of the driver's fitness to drive. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to engage in a high-speed pursuit without a clear and immediate threat to public safety, as this itself can escalate risks and is governed by strict police pursuit policies in New Zealand, which would likely not be triggered by initial erratic driving alone. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with risk assessment. Is the behavior a minor deviation or a significant danger? This is followed by an assessment of available information, what is being observed. Then, consider the relevant legal framework. What powers and obligations do I have under the Land Transport Act 1998 and associated rules? Finally, evaluate the potential outcomes of each course of action, prioritizing public safety and procedural fairness. Question 8. Assessment of a driver licensing examiner's response to a candidate in Manawatu, Wanganui who, visibly distressed and tearful, requests to proceed with their practical driving test immediately, stating they have traveled a long distance and are anxious to complete it today, despite the examiner observing signs of fatigue and heightened emotionality that could impair their driving ability. Option A. Advise the candidate that their emotional state is not a valid reason to postpone the test and insist they proceed immediately, emphasizing that the test must be completed today as planned. Option B. Proceed with the driving test as scheduled, but with increased vigilance, hoping the candidate's desire to complete the test will override their current emotional state and fatigue. Option C. Suggest that if the candidate is willing to sign a waiver acknowledging the risks, the test can proceed, allowing them to complete it despite their current condition. Option D. Calmly acknowledge the candidate's distress. Explain that the test cannot proceed under these conditions due to safety regulations, and offer to reschedule the test for another day when they are feeling more composed and alert, ensuring they understand the importance of a clear mind for safe driving. The correct answer is D. Calmly acknowledge the candidate's distress. Explain that the test cannot proceed under these conditions due to safety regulations, and offer to reschedule the test for another day when they are feeling more composed and alert, ensuring they understand the importance of a clear mind for safe driving. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a driver with the overarching responsibility to ensure road safety and adherence to the Land Transport Act 1998 and associated land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017 in New Zealand. The driver's emotional state and potential impairment due to stress or fatigue could compromise their ability to operate a vehicle safely, necessitating a careful and ethical response that prioritizes public safety without unfairly penalizing the individual. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a calm, empathetic, and firm stance that prioritizes safety and compliance. This means acknowledging the driver's distress while clearly explaining the legal requirements for obtaining a driver's license and the importance of passing the practical test under safe conditions. The examiner must reiterate the purpose of the test to assess competency and ensure road safety for all users in Manawatu, Wanganui. This aligns with the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which mandates that practical driving tests are conducted to a standard that ensures the applicant can operate a vehicle safely and competently. The examiner's duty of care extends to the public, requiring them to uphold these standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves succumbing to the driver's emotional plea and allowing them to proceed with the test despite clear signs of distress and potential impairment. This fails to uphold the safety standards mandated by the Land Transport Act 1998 and the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. It creates a significant risk to public safety in Manawatu, Wanganui and undermines the integrity of the licensing process. Ethically, it is a dereliction of the examiner's duty of care. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the driver's concerns entirely and proceed with the test in a harsh or unsympathetic manner without offering any explanation or support. While safety and compliance are paramount, complete lack of empathy can be counterproductive and may lead to further distress, potentially impacting the driver's performance even more negatively. While not directly violating a specific rule, it falls short of professional conduct expected of a licensing examiner. A third incorrect approach is to offer to pass the driver without a proper assessment, perhaps in exchange for a future favor or simply to end the stressful situation quickly. This is a severe ethical breach and a direct violation of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. It compromises the entire licensing system, puts unqualified drivers on the road, and erodes public trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance, while also demonstrating empathy and clear communication. This involves 1. Assessing the situation objectively, identifying any safety risks or potential rule breaches. 2. Clearly communicating the relevant rules and the rationale behind them. 3. Offering reasonable alternatives or support within the bounds of the regulations, e.g., rescheduling the test. 4. Maintaining professional demeanor and upholding the integrity of the licensing process. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that a driver employed by a transport company in Manawatu, Wanganui, has been operating a light truck for the past 2 weeks, and their driver license status is currently unconfirmed due to a system error with the NZTA. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the transport company to take? Option A. Terminate the driver's employment immediately due to the uncertainty surrounding their license. Option B. Immediately suspend the driver's driving duties until their license status is officially confirmed as valid. Option C. Assume the driver's license is valid based on their previous employment record and permit them to continue driving. Option D. Allow the driver to continue operating the light truck while the company investigates the NZTA system error. Correct answer is B. Immediately suspend the driver's driving duties until their license status is officially confirmed as valid. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017 in Manawatu, Wanganui. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver to perform their duties with the legal obligation to hold a valid license. Misjudging this situation could lead to significant legal repercussions for both the driver and the employer, including fines and potential license suspension, and could compromise road safety. The best professional approach involves immediately ceasing the driver's duties until a valid license is confirmed. This aligns directly with the core requirement of the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017, which mandates that a person must hold a valid driver license appropriate for the class of vehicle they are driving. By ensuring the driver is properly licensed before allowing them to operate a vehicle, the employer upholds their legal responsibility and prioritizes public safety. This proactive stance prevents potential breaches of the law and avoids the risks associated with unlicensed driving. An incorrect approach would be to allow the driver to continue operating the vehicle while the license status is being investigated. This directly contravenes the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017, as it permits unlicensed driving, which is an offense. Ethically, it exposes the public to the risks associated with an unverified driver and demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach is to assume the license is valid based on past experience or the driver's assurance. While trust is important, regulatory compliance requires verification. Relying on assumptions rather than concrete evidence creates a significant compliance gap and exposes the organization to liability. This approach fails to meet the due diligence expected of an employer under the relevant legislation. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to dismiss the driver without proper investigation or communication. While the driver's license status is critical, hasty dismissal without due process can lead to unfair employment practices and potential legal challenges unrelated to the licensing issue itself. The focus must remain on resolving the licensing discrepancy in a manner that is both legally compliant and procedurally fair. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and risk mitigation. This involves 1. Identifying the potential regulatory breach. 2. Verifying the facts through official channels, e.g., checking the NZTA database. 3. Taking immediate, appropriate action to prevent further breaches, e.g., temporarily suspending driving duties. 4. Communicating clearly with the affected individual and relevant authorities. 5. Documenting all actions taken and decisions made. Question 10. Regulatory review indicates that for a learner driver in Manawatu, Wanganui, New Zealand, to fulfill the supervised driving practice requirement for a specific journey, at least 50% of the total distance driven must be under supervision. If a proposed practice route is 150 km in total length, what is the minimum distance that must be driven under supervision to comply with the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017? Option A, 75 km. Option B, at least half the drive. Option C, 50 km. Option D, 37.5 km. The correct answer is A, 75 km. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a learner's license in Manawatu, Wanganui, New Zealand. The challenge lies in accurately calculating the required distance for a supervised driving practice session based on specific regulatory requirements and the driver's current location. Misinterpreting or miscalculating this distance could lead to non-compliance with the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017, potentially invalidating the practice session and delaying the licensing process. Careful judgment is required to ensure the calculation is precise and adheres to the spirit and letter of the law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a precise calculation using the provided road distance and the specified minimum distance requirement. This approach directly addresses the regulatory mandate by ensuring the supervised driving practice meets the minimum kilometers stipulated by the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. Specifically, it involves determining the total distance of the proposed route and then calculating the required portion for supervised practice. The calculation is as follows. Total route distance equals 150 km. Minimum supervised practice distance equals 50% of total route distance. Required supervised practice distance equals \0. 50 times 150 text km equals 75 km. This method is correct because it directly applies the regulatory percentage to the actual distance, ensuring compliance with the rule's intent to provide adequate supervised experience. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that calculates the required distance as a fixed amount, such as 50 km, without reference to the total route distance, fails to comply with the rule's proportional requirement. Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017 specifies a percentage, not a flat rate, for supervised practice. This approach ignores the variable nature of the route and the rule's intent to ensure a significant portion of any practice drive is supervised. Another incorrect approach might be to simply state that at least half the drive should be supervised without performing the calculation. While conceptually aligned, this lacks the precision required for official record-keeping and verification. The rule implies a quantifiable measure, and a vague statement does not meet this standard. It leaves room for subjective interpretation and potential noncompliance. Finally, an approach that calculates the supervised distance based on a different percentage, for example, 25% of the total route, is incorrect because it directly contravenes the specified 50% requirement in the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. This would result in insufficient supervised practice, failing to meet the regulatory threshold for a valid practice session. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to regulatory compliance. This involves first identifying the relevant legislation, in this case, the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. Second, understanding the specific requirements within that legislation, such as the percentage for supervised driving practice. Third, gathering all necessary data, total route distance. Fourth, performing accurate calculations using appropriate mathematical formulas. Finally, documenting the calculation and the resulting supervised distance to demonstrate compliance. This structured process ensures accuracy, adherence to regulations, and defensible decision-making. Question 11. Consider a scenario where a licensing officer in Manawatu, Wanganui is processing an application for a Class 1 learner driver license. The applicant, who appears anxious but claims to have extensively studied the New Zealand Road Code and possesses significant informal driving experience, has submitted all the necessary identification documents. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing officer to ensure compliance with New Zealand's driver licensing regulations? Option A. Verify the applicant's identification and then administer the official knowledge test as per the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. Option B. Issue the learner license immediately, trusting the applicant's self-assessment of their knowledge and experience. Option C. Advise the applicant on alternative, less formal methods to obtain a learner license to expedite the process. Option D. Refuse the learner license application based on the applicant's visible nervousness during the initial interaction. The correct answer is A. Verify the applicant's identification and then administer the official knowledge test as per the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements of the Manawatu-Wanganui region. A licensing officer must act impartially, adhering strictly to the Land Transport Act 1998 and associated Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, while also considering the applicant's circumstances. Failure to do so could result in issuing a license to an unqualified driver, compromising public safety, or unfairly denying a license to a deserving applicant. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's documentation and a direct, professional assessment of their driving ability against the established criteria for a Class 1 learner license in New Zealand. This means verifying all submitted forms, ensuring the applicant meets the age and identity requirements, and then conducting the required knowledge test. If the applicant successfully passes the knowledge test, they are then eligible to apply for a learner license. This approach is correct because it directly follows the procedural requirements outlined in the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which mandates successful completion of the knowledge test as a prerequisite for a learner license. It upholds the principle of equitable application of the law, ensuring all applicants are assessed on the same objective standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to issue the learner license based solely on the applicant's assurance that they have studied the New Zealand Road Code and have prior driving experience. This fails to comply with the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which explicitly requires passing a knowledge test. It bypasses a critical safety check and demonstrates a lack of due diligence, potentially leading to an unqualified driver on the road. Another incorrect approach would be to refuse the learner license application outright because the applicant appears nervous or hesitant during the initial interaction, without proceeding to the formal assessment. This is an arbitrary decision, not based on objective criteria. The Land Transport Act 1998 and the associated rules focus on demonstrated knowledge and practical ability, not on subjective impressions of an applicant's demeanor. Such a refusal would be discriminatory and contrary to the principles of fair process. A further incorrect approach would be to suggest the applicant obtain a license through unofficial channels or to offer assistance that circumvents the standard testing procedures. This is a severe ethical and legal breach. It undermines the integrity of the licensing system, compromises public safety, and could lead to severe penalties for the licensing officer and the applicant. It violates the fundamental duty of a licensing officer to uphold the law and ensure road safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must clearly understand and internalize the relevant legislation and rules, such as the Land Transport Act 1998 and the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. Second, they should approach each applicant with impartiality, focusing on objective criteria and established procedures. Third, they must conduct all required assessments and verifications diligently. Finally, if faced with ambiguity or a situation not explicitly covered, they should consult with supervisors or relevant authorities to ensure adherence to legal and ethical standards. Question 12. Upon reviewing the learner's progress in preparation for their practical driving test in the Manawatu-Wanganui region, an instructor observes that while the learner is enthusiastic and has completed many hours of practice, they consistently struggle with judging gaps in traffic at intersections and occasionally exceed the speed limit on open roads, even when reminded. Considering the requirements of the New Zealand Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which of the following approaches best reflects professional and regulatory responsibility? Option A. Proceed with the practical driving test, providing the learner with a final reminder to be extra cautious at intersections and to adhere strictly to speed limits, trusting their overall enthusiasm and practice hours. Option B. Proceed with the practical driving test but discreetly signal to the learner during the test if they are about to make a mistake at an intersection or exceed the speed limit to help them avoid failing. Option C. Recommend the learner take the test immediately, suggesting they can learn to manage these specific issues once they are licensed, as the primary goal is to get them licensed as soon as possible. Option D. Advise the learner that they are not yet ready for the practical driving test, and explain that further targeted practice is needed to address their difficulties with judging traffic gaps and speed control, as these are critical safety competencies. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the practical driving test, providing the learner with a final reminder to be extra cautious at intersections and to adhere strictly to speed limits, trusting their overall enthusiasm and practice hours. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a learner driver with the overarching responsibility for public safety and adherence to the New Zealand Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. The instructor must assess the learner's readiness for the practical test while also ensuring they are not put in a position where they might contravene licensing regulations, which could have serious consequences for both the learner and the instructor. The pressure to pass a test can sometimes lead to overlooking critical safety aspects or pushing boundaries, necessitating a robust ethical and regulatory framework for decision-making. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the learner's demonstrated driving competency against the criteria set out in the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017, specifically focusing on their ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently in various road conditions relevant to the Manawatu-Wanganui region. This includes evaluating their understanding and application of traffic laws, hazard perception, vehicle control, and adherence to speed limits and road signs. If the learner consistently demonstrates these competencies and can operate the vehicle without posing a risk to themselves or others, then proceeding with the test is appropriate. This aligns with the rule's objective of ensuring only competent drivers are licensed, thereby promoting road safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the test solely because the learner expresses high confidence or has invested significant time and money in lessons, despite observable deficiencies in their driving. This prioritizes the learner's emotional state or financial investment over the regulatory requirement for demonstrated competence and public safety, potentially leading to the licensing of an unsafe driver. This fails to uphold the spirit and letter of the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017. Another incorrect approach is to withhold the test due to minor, easily correctable errors that do not fundamentally compromise safety or demonstrate a lack of understanding of core driving principles. While the rule emphasizes competence, it also implies a practical standard. Overly strict adherence to minor imperfections, especially if the learner shows a capacity to learn and adapt, can be seen as an arbitrary barrier to licensing and does not serve the purpose of ensuring safe drivers. A third incorrect approach is to encourage the learner to wing it or to overlook specific rule infringements during the test, hoping the examiner won't notice. This is a direct contravention of ethical instructing practices and the integrity of the licensing process. It undermines the purpose of the test, which is to verify competence according to the rule, and actively promotes dishonest behavior, which is professionally unacceptable and could lead to severe penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the specific requirements of the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017 and the assessment criteria for the practical driving test. 2. Conducting an objective, ongoing assessment of the learner's skills and knowledge throughout their training. 3. Making a decision based on the learner's demonstrated ability to meet these criteria, not on external pressures or personal biases. 4. Communicating the decision and the reasons for it clearly and constructively to the learner, providing specific feedback for improvement if the test is not yet advisable. Question 13. When evaluating a learner driver's readiness for their restricted driver license test in Manawatu-Wanganui, New Zealand, after completing the mandatory lesson duration, what is the most responsible course of action for an instructor? Option A. Advise the learner to book their test immediately, as they have fulfilled the minimum lesson requirement, regardless of their observed driving performance. Option B. Suggest the learner undertake additional lessons, even if they have met the required standard, to ensure they are absolutely perfect before attempting the test. Option C. Recommend the learner proceed to the test if they have demonstrated consistent safe driving practices and hazard perception throughout the lesson, indicating they are ready to operate a vehicle independently. Option D. Recommend the learner book their test, focusing primarily on the administrative completion of the lesson requirement, rather than a detailed assessment of their practical driving skills. The correct answer is C. Recommend the learner proceed to the test if they have demonstrated consistent safe driving practices and hazard perception throughout the lesson, indicating they are ready to operate a vehicle independently. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a learner driver with the overarching responsibility for public safety and adherence to the specific regulations governing driver licensing in Manawatu, Wanganui, New Zealand. The instructor must make a judgment call that could impact the learner's progress and confidence, while also upholding the integrity of the licensing process and ensuring compliance with the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the instructor assessing the learner's readiness based on a comprehensive evaluation of their performance during the lesson, specifically in relation to the skills and knowledge required for the restricted license. This includes observing their ability to consistently apply safe driving practices, demonstrate hazard perception, and manage the vehicle independently in various traffic conditions. If the learner demonstrates proficiency in these areas, and the instructor believes they are ready to undertake the practical test without posing an undue risk to themselves or others, then recommending they proceed is appropriate. This aligns with the ethical duty of an instructor to prepare competent drivers and the regulatory intent of the licensing system, which is to ensure drivers meet a minimum standard of safety before operating a vehicle unsupervised. The instructor's professional judgment, informed by their expertise and the specific requirements of the Manawatu Wanganui testing standards, is paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending the learner proceed to the test solely because they have completed the required lesson duration without a thorough assessment of their actual driving competency is a regulatory failure. This approach prioritizes administrative completion over safety and skill acquisition, undermining the purpose of the licensing process. It could lead to a driver who is not adequately prepared, increasing the risk of accidents. Similarly, recommending the learner proceed despite clear and consistent errors in critical areas like hazard perception or vehicle control is ethically unsound and a breach of the instructor's duty of care. This would be a failure to uphold the safety standards expected by the Manawatu Wanganui Licensing Authority. Finally, delaying the recommendation for the test simply to extend the number of paid lessons without a genuine assessment of the learner's readiness is unethical and exploitative. This prioritizes financial gain over the learner's progress and the integrity of the licensing system. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific competency standards required for the restricted license in Manawatu Wanganui, as outlined in the Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 2017 and associated testing protocols. 2. Conducting a thorough and objective assessment of the learner's performance throughout the lesson, identifying strengths and weaknesses. 3. Making a judgment based on evidence of competency, not just administrative requirements or personal convenience. 4. Communicating the assessment clearly and constructively to the learner, explaining the reasons for the recommendation. 5. Acting in the best interests of both the learner and public safety. Question 14. The analysis reveals that Mr. Henderson, a resident of Manawatu Wanganui, has recently been diagnosed with a medical condition that he believes might affect his driving. He is concerned about renewing his driver's license and is considering his options. Which of the following actions best reflects the responsible and legally compliant approach for Mr. Henderson in Manawatu Wanganui? Option A. Mr. Henderson should rely on his own judgment about his driving capabilities and renew his license without consulting a doctor or informing the NZTA about his medical condition. Option B. Mr. Henderson should seek advice from friends who have similar medical conditions about whether they inform the NZTA when renewing their licenses in Manawatu Wanganui. Option C. Mr. Henderson should immediately inform the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, about his medical condition and obtain a medical certificate from his registered medical practitioner to be submitted with his license renewal application. Option D. Mr. Henderson should wait until his license renewal is due and then decide if he feels fit to drive, without informing the NZTA of his recent diagnosis. The correct answer is C. Mr. Henderson should immediately inform the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, about his medical condition and obtain a medical certificate from his registered medical practitioner to be submitted with his license renewal application. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, is seeking to renew his Manawatu Wanganui driver's license. He has recently been diagnosed with a medical condition that could potentially affect his driving ability. The challenge lies in balancing Mr. Henderson's desire to maintain his mobility and independence with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety on Manawatu Wanganui roads. This requires careful judgment and adherence to the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, and associated medical standards. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently reporting the medical condition to the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, and providing the required medical certificate from a registered medical practitioner. This aligns with the legal obligation under the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, specifically concerning the declaration of medical conditions that may impair driving ability. The NZTA role is to assess the medical information against established fitness to drive standards and determine if any conditions or restrictions are necessary for the license. This approach prioritizes public safety by ensuring that only medically fit individuals are licensed to drive, while also providing a clear pathway for drivers with medical conditions to be assessed fairly. An incorrect approach would be to withhold information about the medical condition from the NZTA. This constitutes a breach of the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, which mandates the disclosure of such conditions. Ethically, it is a failure to uphold the duty of care to other road users. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on a self-assessment of driving ability without consulting a medical professional or informing the NZTA. This bypasses the regulatory framework designed to assess fitness to drive and could lead to a license being issued to an individual who poses a risk to themselves and others. Finally, attempting to obtain a license renewal through informal channels or by providing misleading information would be a serious contravention of the law and a profound ethical lapse, undermining the integrity of the licensing system. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal obligations under the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. This involves identifying any potential impact of a medical condition on driving safety. The next step is to consult relevant medical guidelines and standards for fitness to drive. Transparency and proactive communication with the licensing authority, NZTA, are crucial. If a medical condition is present, seeking a professional medical assessment and obtaining the necessary documentation is paramount. The decision-making process should always prioritize public safety while ensuring fair and equitable treatment for the individual seeking to maintain their license. Question 15. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a driver in Manawatu Wanganui experiences a sudden, unexpected, and significant distraction while navigating a busy urban intersection. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure safety and compliance with local road rules? Option A. Pull over to the side of the road, but continue to engage with the distraction to resolve it quickly. Option B. Ignore the distraction and continue driving at the normal speed to avoid disrupting traffic flow. Option C. Continue driving at a reduced speed while attempting to address the distraction to minimize time lost. Option D. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the main roadway and cease all non-driving related activities until the distraction is resolved. The correct answer is D. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the main roadway and cease all non-driving related activities until the distraction is resolved. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle. The temptation to prioritize convenience over safety and compliance is a common pitfall. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision made prioritizes the safety of oneself and others on the road, adhering strictly to the rules of the road in Manawatu Wanganui. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately pulling over to a safe location off the main roadway and assessing the situation. This approach is correct because it prioritizes safety and compliance with the Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004, which mandates that drivers must not operate a vehicle in a manner that causes undue danger to any person or property. By stopping, the driver removes the immediate risk of an accident caused by distraction or impairment, allowing for a calm and legal resolution to the issue. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of all road users to maintain a safe driving environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Continuing to drive while attempting to address the issue, even if slowly, is professionally unacceptable. This directly violates the principle of maintaining proper control of the vehicle and creates a significant risk of accident, contravening the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. It demonstrates a failure to prioritize safety and a disregard for the potential harm to others. Pulling over to the side of the road but continuing to engage with the distraction, such as a prolonged phone conversation or complex task, is also professionally unacceptable. While stopping is a good first step, the continued engagement with the distraction negates the safety benefit of stopping. The driver is still not fully attentive to the driving environment, which is a breach of the duty of care owed to other road users and a potential violation of rules regarding distracted driving. Ignoring the issue and continuing to drive as if nothing is happening is the most professionally unacceptable approach. This demonstrates a complete disregard for personal well-being, the safety of others, and the legal requirements of operating a vehicle. It is a direct contravention of the fundamental principles of responsible driving and the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance above all else. When faced with a situation that could compromise driving ability or create a hazard, the immediate and primary action should be to remove the vehicle from the flow of traffic and cease all non-driving related activities until the situation is resolved and the driver can safely resume driving. This proactive approach ensures adherence to regulations and upholds ethical responsibilities. Question 16. Implementation of a driver's immediate response in the Manawatu Wanganui region when their mobile phone unexpectedly falls to the floor of the vehicle while driving at the speed limit on a moderately busy road. Option A. Continue driving as normal, planning to retrieve the phone once the journey is completed. Option B. Immediately pull over to the side of the road in a safe location and activate hazard lights to retrieve the phone. Option C. Continue driving at the speed limit while attempting to quickly retrieve the phone from the floor. Option D. Briefly glance down at the phone's location without slowing down or pulling over. The correct answer is B. Immediately pull over to the side of the road in a safe location and activate hazard lights to retrieve the phone. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in the Manawatu Wanganui region because it requires them to balance immediate personal needs with their legal obligations and the safety of others on the road. The temptation to prioritize convenience over adherence to traffic laws, especially when facing a minor inconvenience, necessitates careful judgment and a strong understanding of road rules. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately pulling over to a safe location and activating hazard lights if experiencing a sudden, distracting issue like a dropped phone. This approach prioritizes safety by removing the immediate distraction from the driving task and signaling to other road users that the vehicle is experiencing a temporary problem. This aligns with the fundamental principle of the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 in New Zealand, which mandates that drivers must not drive in a way that causes undue danger to any person or vehicle. Specifically, Section 11 of the rule states that a driver must not operate a vehicle in a manner that creates a hazard. By pulling over, the driver is actively mitigating a potential hazard. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to attempt to retrieve the dropped phone while continuing to drive, even at a reduced speed. This is a direct violation of the principle of maintaining full control of the vehicle and undivided attention to the road. It creates an undue danger to other road users, as the driver's focus is divided, increasing the risk of collision. This behavior contravenes Section 11 of the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Another incorrect approach is to quickly glance down at the phone to see where it fell without slowing down or pulling over. While seemingly a brief distraction, even a momentary lapse in visual attention to the road can have severe consequences, especially in varying traffic conditions. This action still represents a failure to operate the vehicle without creating a hazard and is contrary to the expectation of constant vigilance required of a driver. A further incorrect approach is to continue driving as normal, assuming the phone will be retrieved later. This ignores the immediate distraction and potential for the phone to cause further disruption or become a physical obstruction within the vehicle. It fails to proactively address a situation that has already compromised the driver's full attention and control, thereby creating a latent hazard. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance above all else. When faced with a distraction or a situation that compromises their ability to drive safely, the immediate and instinctive response should be to mitigate the risk. This involves stopping the vehicle in a safe manner, addressing the issue, and only resuming driving when full attention and control can be re-established. This proactive approach aligns with the ethical responsibility of a driver to protect themselves and others on the road. Question 17. To address the challenge of navigating unmarked intersections in the Manawatu-Wanganui region, a driver approaches an intersection where two vehicles arrive simultaneously from different roads, with no traffic signals or signs indicating right-of-way. The other vehicle is approaching from the driver's left. What is the legally mandated and safest course of action according to New Zealand road rules? Option A. Assume the other driver will yield and proceed cautiously. Option B. Proceed through the intersection as the other vehicle is on the left. Option C. Attempt to signal to the other driver to determine who should go first. Option D. Give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. The correct answer is D. Give way to the vehicle approaching from the right. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in the Manawatu-Wanganui region due to the potential for confusion regarding the application of specific road rules, particularly concerning right-of-way at intersections. Careful judgment is required to ensure the safety of all road users and compliance with the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the New Zealand Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, specifically focusing on the principle of giving way at intersections where there are no signs or signals. This rule mandates that a driver must give way to any vehicle on their right. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the codified legal requirements for road use in New Zealand, ensuring predictable and safe interactions at unmarked intersections. It prioritizes safety by establishing a clear, universally understood rule for right-of-way, thereby minimizing the risk of collisions. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the vehicle approaching from the left has the right-of-way simply because it arrived at the intersection first. This is a common misconception, but is not supported by New Zealand road rules. The failure here is a direct contravention of the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, which does not grant right-of-way based on arrival time at unmarked intersections. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed through the intersection without yielding, assuming the other driver will yield. This demonstrates a dangerous disregard for the established rules of the road and the safety of others. It constitutes a failure to comply with the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 and creates an immediate hazard. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to signal intentions to the other driver through hand gestures or flashing headlights to decide who goes first. While well-intentioned, this deviates from the clear, unambiguous rule set out in the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Relying on such informal communication can lead to misinterpretation and is not a substitute for adhering to the legal requirement to give way to the vehicle on your right. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the intersection type, marked or unmarked. 2. Recalling and applying the specific New Zealand Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 relevant to that intersection type. 3. Prioritizing safety and adherence to the law over assumptions or informal communication. 4. Being prepared to yield even if it means a slight delay to prevent a potential collision. Question 18. Examination of the data shows a driver licensing applicant for a Class 1 license in the Manawatu-Wanganui region has presented with a passport that has recently expired, though the photograph is still clearly identifiable. The applicant is otherwise well prepared for the practical driving assessment. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing officer? Option A. Proceed with the practical driving assessment and process the license application, noting the expired identification for future reference. Option B. Decline to proceed with the application until a valid form of identification is provided, as per the requirements of the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2007. Option C. Advise the applicant to return with a different, valid form of identification and reschedule the practical driving assessment for a later date. Option D. Accept the expired passport as valid identification, given the clear photograph and the applicant's preparedness for the assessment. The correct answer is B. Decline to proceed with the application until a valid form of identification is provided, as per the requirements of the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2007. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver to obtain a license with the paramount importance of ensuring road safety and adherence to the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2007 in New Zealand. A licensing officer must exercise careful judgment to avoid compromising safety standards while facilitating the licensing process. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's ability to meet the required driving standards, as stipulated by the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2007. This includes verifying all documentation and conducting the practical driving assessment in accordance with the prescribed criteria. This approach ensures that only competent drivers are licensed, thereby upholding public safety and fulfilling the officer's statutory duty. An incorrect approach would be to overlook minor documentation discrepancies if the applicant appears otherwise competent. This fails to adhere to the strict requirements of the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2007, which mandates complete and accurate documentation for all license applications. Ethically, it compromises the integrity of the licensing system and potentially puts other road users at risk. Another incorrect approach would be to expedite the practical driving assessment due to the applicant's expressed urgency or perceived familiarity with the testing officer. This violates the principle of objective assessment and the requirement for all applicants to undergo the full, standardized evaluation process outlined in the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2007. It introduces bias and undermines the fairness and credibility of the testing procedure. A further incorrect approach would be to provide the applicant with advance information about the specific routes or maneuvers that will be assessed. This constitutes a breach of examination integrity and contravenes the spirit and letter of the Land Transport Rule. Driver Licensing 2007, which requires a fair and impartial assessment of driving ability under typical road conditions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to regulatory requirements, ethical conduct, and the overarching goal of public safety. This involves a systematic review of all application components, objective evaluation of practical skills, and a commitment to maintaining the integrity of the licensing process, regardless of external pressures or personal relationships. Question 19. Research into the Manawatu Wanganui driver's test curriculum highlights the importance of understanding traffic control devices. Imagine you are driving in Palmerston North and approach a section of road clearly marked with a no stopping sign. You need to quickly adjust your phone to a hands-free setting to receive an urgent prearranged work call. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to New Zealand road rules? Option A. Briefly stop on the side of the road to adjust your phone, as it is a quick and essential task. Option B. Continue driving without stopping, as the sign explicitly prohibits any stopping. Option C. Pull over to the side of the road to adjust your phone, as you will only be stopped for a moment. Option D. Stop where other vehicles appear to be stopped, assuming it is permissible in that location. The correct answer is B. Continue driving without stopping, as the sign explicitly prohibits any stopping. Explanation. Research into the Manawatu Wanganui driver's test reveals that understanding road signage and rules is paramount for safe driving. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a driver's interpretation of a sign directly impacts their immediate actions and the safety of themselves and others. The core of the challenge lies in accurately deciphering the meaning of a sign within the context of New Zealand road rules and applying that understanding correctly. The best professional practice involves a driver accurately identifying the sign and understanding its specific meaning according to the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. This means recognizing that a no stopping sign prohibits any stopping, even briefly, for any purpose other than to comply with a traffic control device or direction from a police officer. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal requirements of the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004, specifically concerning stopping restrictions. The rule is designed to maintain traffic flow and prevent hazards, and strict adherence ensures compliance and safety. An incorrect approach would be to assume that no stopping allows for brief stops for essential purposes like dropping off a passenger. This is a failure to comply with the specific prohibition of the sign as defined by the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004. Another incorrect approach would be to stop because other vehicles are stopping, as the actions of other drivers do not override legal signage. This demonstrates a lack of independent judgment and a failure to prioritize adherence to traffic laws. Finally, stopping to check a map, while a seemingly minor action, still constitutes stopping where it is explicitly prohibited and therefore violates the rule. Professionals should approach such situations by first meticulously observing and identifying the traffic sign. They must then recall or consult the relevant section of the Land Transport Road User, Rule 2004, that governs the meaning and application of that specific sign. If there is any ambiguity, the safest and most legally compliant course of action is to err on the side of caution and assume the strictest interpretation of the sign's prohibition. This systematic process ensures that decisions are based on legal requirements and contribute to overall road safety. Question 20. Which approach would be the most effective for a driver in Manawatu, Wanganui to determine a safe following distance when traveling at 80 km/h on a dry road, assuming a reaction time of 2 seconds and a typical deceleration rate of 5 m/s2? Option A. Maintain a fixed following distance of 3 seconds, regardless of the current speed. Option B. Estimate the following distance based on a visual judgment of the distance to the vehicle ahead. Option C. Calculate only the braking distance and use that as the following distance. Option D. Calculate the total stopping distance by summing the reaction distance and the braking distance. The correct answer is D. Calculate the total stopping distance by summing the reaction distance and the braking distance. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to accurately calculate the required stopping distance under specific conditions, demonstrating an understanding of road safety principles beyond simple observation. The driver must apply mathematical formulas to real-world driving situations, ensuring they maintain a safe following distance to prevent collisions, especially in adverse conditions. This involves a critical judgment call based on precise calculations, not just a subjective assessment of speed or distance. The best professional practice involves accurately calculating the total stopping distance by summing the reaction distance and the braking distance, using the provided speed and a standard deceleration rate. This approach directly addresses the regulatory requirement to maintain a safe distance from the vehicle ahead, as mandated by road safety laws in Manawatu, Wanganui, which implicitly require drivers to understand the physics of stopping. Specifically, the formula for total stopping distance is D total equals D reaction plus D braking or D reaction equals V times T reaction and D braking equals frac V22A . Using the given speed and a standard deceleration rate ensures a scientifically sound and legally defensible safe distance. An incorrect approach would be to estimate the stopping distance based on a simple visual judgment of the distance to the vehicle ahead. This fails to account for the mathematical relationship between speed, reaction time, and braking force, leading to an unsafe following distance that could violate road rules and increase the risk of a collision. Another incorrect approach would be to only consider the braking distance and ignore the reaction distance. This overlooks a significant component of the total stopping distance, as driver reaction time is a crucial factor in preventing accidents, and failing to account for it would result in a dangerously short following distance. Finally, using an arbitrary, fixed following distance without considering the current speed is also incorrect. Road safety regulations in Manawatu, Wanganui, like elsewhere, emphasize that safe following distance is speed-dependent, and a fixed distance would be insufficient at higher speeds, thus failing to meet the required safety standards. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes accurate calculation and adherence to establish safety formulas. This involves understanding the underlying physics of vehicle dynamics, applying the correct mathematical formulas for reaction and braking distances, and then summing these to determine the total stopping distance. This calculated distance should then be used to maintain a safe following gap, ensuring compliance with road rules and promoting overall road safety.